So now the season has started there, Sammy, the fantasy football season. And I don't know if you saw it. I did put out a list of my first round mock draft. Not doing well on Twitter. Nobody cares on Twitter, apparently, but everybody on Instagram. And it's funny because I get all the Instagram notifications. Like, how is this guy ahead of this guy? What? And it's just the first 12. And I had Drake London in there. And a lot of people are put off by the Drake London thing. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Michael Penix looked pretty good last year. And they're going to be featuring Drake London a ton. I love Drake London this season. But a lot of people were asking me about Colston Loveland. And they're like, what is Colston Loveland's fantasy ranking? And I'm like, honestly, like he's almost, I think I had him at like the tight end 18, which I really love him. I think he's a great player. And we'll be talking about this with Greg Braggs here in just a moment. I really love Colston Loveland, but when it comes to fantasy football, a guy who's not going to be practicing in the rookie mini camps or anything like that, and he's coming onto a team that's loaded with a lot of offensive talent. I mean, that's one of the things too, is like when you look at somebody like Tyler Warren, he's going to Indiana. I think whichever one of these tight ends would have gone to Indianapolis or Jacksonville, if that would have been the case, would have been rated a lot higher. And it has nothing to do with whether I like this player more or not. So it's really interesting. And it's fun to get back into that thing and go ahead and check out my top 150 for NFL.com, NFL.com/rank. Actually, it's not published yet. I forgot. We're going live. You know what, Sammy? Enough about the fantasy football. Let's just start the show.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Adam Rank.
It's Hester trying to work it back to the middle. Gets past the first wave, and here he goes. It's Hester inside the 30. Hester's going to take it all the way for a touchdown. And no flag, 92 yards.
The sickest Chicago Bears and fantasy football podcast. Sports entertainment like no other. It's gonna be sick.
It's Wednesday night. You know what that means? It is time for Take It to the Rank. One of the best nights for Chicago Bears football, and a lot of cool things going on. Obviously, we got the Take It to the Rank. The Tape Never Lies Network will be coming up here in about 90 minutes. AEW Dynamite is this evening. There is no MTV challenge or anything like that, but for a lot of us, they don't drop Andor until 10 o'clock local, at least for me. They drop it at 10 p.m. And I'm like, I can't wait. I'm training and all this stuff. Like I'm exhausted. I got training tonight, as a matter of fact, here in about 2 hours. So it's like one of those things. Like there's a lot of things going on a Wednesday night, but we're very happy to be here at Take It to the Rank. This is going to be our first opportunity to talk to Greg Braggs about his impressions of the draft since everything went down. But I do want to remind people in talking about Colston Loveland, and I'm rocking the hat right now too. I'm purchasing all the Colston Loveland cards that I can find. And speaking of which, at Windy City Sports Cards, we specialize in buying and selling all things related to Chicago sports. So whether you're a diehard fan of the Bears, Bulls, Cubs, White Sox, Blackhawks, Sky, or Fire, we have got you covered with an extensive collection of sports memorabilia and collectibles. And in addition to our Chicago-focused items, if you're a fan of Tyler Warren, and you're like, I'm going to go get all his cards, guess what? Windy City Sports Cards has got you covered. Our guy, Mike, will take care of you. But speaking of the draft, I've wanted to get his reaction because I was watching. One of the cool things, when I did my mock draft this year, I didn't look at anybody else's mock drafts. I just did it on my own. I do use Daniel Jeremiah's stuff a little bit, his top 150, not his draft. And then during the draft, like I didn't really see a lot of reactions until later, but people were talking about Colston Love. I'm shocked. But in any event, let's bring out from CHGO, the co-host of Take It to the Rank, the incomparable Greg Braggs. How are you?
I'm great. Finally passed the draft hypotheticals, and now we get to live in a little bit more of reality. Got the schedule coming up here soon.
Oh, God, yeah.
Rookie mini camp coming up next weekend. So finally, we're getting to some action, and that'll springboard us all the way past the summer and into football season. Who needs summer?
Yeah. Well, for me, it is actually draft season now. Because now we're talking about real drafts, your fantasy football draft, which is the most important thing. By the way, it's also becoming golf season for you. This is what I meant to always keep showing you. I have this ball for you. It's a ball. I don't know if you can see the logo on it.
No, I can't. It's not in focus.
Not in focus.
I'm trying.
It's a purple thing.
Yeah.
It's a purple logo.
Okay. I
The
can't.
Taco Bell logo. It's a Taco Bell.
Oh,
logo.
it's a Taco Bell logo. I should have. How do I not recognize
How do you
it?
not recognize the Taco Bell logo? By the way,
that's a bad job by me.
I don't eat that place and I don't hit those golf balls. I'm like, I know who would love this. I would actually found it on a course. Like, oh, somebody's like, are you going to play that? I'm like, no. I still got the Strixons in my bag. But yes, we're past. But listen, we're past the draft and everything. I did go back and watch a lot of the coverage from CHGO, and I enjoyed it. You guys are awesome.
Thank you.
You did not seem thrilled with Colston Loveland. What is wrong with you? I mean, no. What are we feeling here?
Yeah, it wasn't anything against Colston Loveland personally. If you go back and watch our, lead up to that moment, we were discussing the possibility of it being, a tight end situation where Tyler Warren was the name that most people would bring up. That was kind of the go-to tight end. And I had been talking with Adam Hogue, live on the air. And when we're in the 6th, 7th pick, as things start to formulate, that I didn't believe that Tyler Warren was the best tight end available, that it was Colston Loveland. I just was of the contention that we shouldn't be drafting a tight end at 10. And so when the 9th pick hits and Kelvin Banks, comes off the board, that was more of what my reaction was, man, how does this board fall so bad that we miss out on all the guys that we're trying to get? So to me, that was the bigger disappointment. Not that they drafted Colston Loveland. I'm excited for him, but the fact that they missed out on Kelvin Banks 1 pick short, and I think any Bears fan can relate to being 1 pick short when you look at Aaron Donald once upon a time.
Yeah.
It always seems to fall that way for the Bears. Now, Colston Loveland can end up being a great pick for the Bears, and we'll just have to wait and see. But I think that if Kelvin had fallen to 10, that would have been the pick.
I know there was a conversation that Ryan Poles had with a lot of the beat writers from the Bears after the first 2 days of the draft. Do you get that indication? Because I kind of feel like you, if Will Campbell was there, if Kelvin Banks Jr. was there, I don't know about Membu, but at the same time, even like Mason Graham, who I had been talking about for quite some time. Do you think that they would have obviously gone with one of those guys had they been available on the board as opposed to Loveland?
Yeah, I don't think Loveland was probably number 1 on their board when you look at some of the other players. Obviously, if Ashton Genty was there at 10, they're going to take him.
Right.
And I think the smoke of all the different trade up, speculation by Diana Rossini and many others saying that there was a potential that the Bears were going to try to trade up. I think that was a real possibility and something that Ryan Poles was attempting to do, but ultimately, this is the way the board fell. And if you look throughout the draft, the Bears never traded up. They made 3 trades and they were all trading back. And so I think that's a sign of the times of where the roster is at. And, maybe that end up being wrong in that calculation. But I think at this point, the organization feels that they can let the draft fall to them because for the most part, their roster is filled out. If they hadn't had a draft at all, they could field a team. There's been years past here, these last few years, certainly since Ryan Poles ripped it up and rebuilt it, that they wouldn't have been able to field a quality team, without the draft. And this year, I don't think that's the case. Everybody they drafted was in a spot where they've already have depth at that position. So, or at least starters at that position. So now you bring in guys that are depth and competition at those positions. And I think that's kind of a unique place for the Bears to be at.
Yeah. That's one of the things that I really liked is that you weren't drafting a position. You were drafting a player. Obviously the Bears wanted Ashton Genty. You don't draft a running. You don't just pivot to Hampton because you wanted a running back. Right. The offensive linemen weren't breaking your way. And it's just like, well, you just don't take the best offensive lineman available. You take the best player. And again, when you talk about fantasy football, it's a very similar thing where it's like, oh, there's been a run on tackles. We've been in fantasy football drafts where it's like, oh, I want to take a wide receiver here. All the wide receivers go off the board, like right in front of you. And you're like, all right, well, I'm going to take this running back. And I think this happened to a lot of people last year when they ended up with Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry, which I know going into a lot of drafts, people didn't want to do that. But all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, this works out. Yeah. Week 12, you're like, I'm so glad this worked out this way.
Right.
And I think it's going to be very similar for the Bears. And I think this is a player. And as a matter of fact, I wrote about this on NFL.com on last Monday, was that Colston Loveland. I go, because I thought Colston Loveland, I had a bold prediction that 2 tight ends were going to go in the top 10. And I thought that was a real possibility. And I'm still going to take credit for it because the teams that could have drafted Tyler Warren just went tackle instead. Or they went with a wide receiver. And time will tell in Carolina if Ted McMillan is not better than Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren, or even Matthew Golden, or even Luther Burden III. There'll be some, hey, look at what you could have had type of situations. But I do believe that the Bears just kind of looked at it like, listen, Colston Loveland's too good. And you and I had a conversation. Like, I think the Bears would have been willing to trade down and be like, yeah, whichever guy we end up with is fine. If I got to pick one, yeah, I'm going to go with Colston Loveland. I think it was all right.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, to me, the most excited pick that we made, if you want to look at my reactions, was Luther Burden. And which is funny because the entire time, you know me, Adam. I mean, I've been saying trench drunk. And then they drafted tight end and then a wide receiver. And I lose I'm so excited that they drafted a wide receiver with their next pick because he's dynamic. And how did he fall to 39? Well, obviously there's some character issues there, but and that's part of the reason why he fell. But when you watch his highlight reel, like, how do you not get excited about that as a fan? And you certainly, in the fantasy football realm, and you look at this team, you're like, man, there's a lot of good options here. Maybe it's not the best for fantasy points when you have this many options on a team, but at the same time, somebody's going to be the beneficiary of some deep ball touchdowns. And I think Luther Burden might be that guy.
No, 100%. And it's one of those things too, where Ted McMillan will probably end up being better served in fantasy football because he doesn't have a lot of competition in Carolina, unless you count Xavier Leggett and Adam Thielen and Jalen Coker. But at the same time, Luther Burden's going to be battling Rome Odunze and DJ Moore, but he's going to make some spectacular plays and going to make some spectacular touchdowns. So for us, all we care about is, are you out there making plays for our favorite team, which I truly believe that he is. And speaking of these things, like, not only on Monday, that previous Monday, had I written, don't rule out Colston Loveland to the Bears. Luther Burden, when I was on Mock Draft Live on the NFL Network, I was the only person. So it was kind of cool, like, being on that show. And again, as I alluded to at the top of the program, is that I didn't look at anybody else's mock drafts. I just went by this and I went by what I like using. I also wanted to make sure that if I'm picking a player, because I had Luther Burden going in the first round, going to the Bills, which I thought would have been an excellent spot for him. I'm like, and even Bucky Brooks, and Bucky Brooks always likes to take the wind out of me sometimes, be like, no, I don't know, right? Like he will easily call me out. He's not one of those guys. Like Daniel Jeremiah is very polite. He'll be like, oh, right, guys, see what you're saying there. Like Bucky Brooks is not like that. Bucky Brooks will happily be like, no, this is dumb. And so when I had Luther Burden, and the producers are like, we had to pull Luther Burden tape because you were the first person on this show, and it's, Lance Zerline and Cynthia Freeland and all those, Rhett Lewis and people like that. They're like, you're the first one that brought him up as a first rounder. Now, in a sense, I guess they are correct because he did not go in the first round. But Bucky Brooks was really talking about him and really talking him up. He's like, that's a pretty smart pick. He's like, the character. I'm like, I think Buffalo would be okay. I think they'd be all right with it. But I really love that pick. And I don't remember if I was on with you guys, if it was this show. It might have been the Marquee Sports Network with Carmen Vitale and Scott Bair, where I brought up Luther Burden as a possibility of our second round pick. Now, I'm pretty sure it was with Scott and Carmen, because I had brought up Luther Burden because I was still convinced that Mason Graham was falling to us. And when they went out there, when Cleveland traded and Jacksonville jumped up, and I'm like, see, Jacksonville wants an offensive minded player. My thing was working. I'm like, okay, listen, Jacksonville not taking Mason Graham was huge for us. And then the Giants take Abdul Carter. I wish they would have taken Ashton, whatever. I'm like, this can still work as long as somebody takes some of the, if the two tight ends go, then
Right.
Mason Graham could fall to it. And Cleveland easily could have taken a quarterback, although they didn't. They did eventually. But Luther Burden, I'm sorry, this is a long-winded story. But Luther Burden, I'm like, Luther Burden is a guy that I would really love to have. And I hate to make this, I hate to make this comparison, but Luther Burden skill-wise is kind of what Ryan Poles wanted Bayless Jones to be. And I think he's a way better version of it, way more polished. And I think this might end up being one of the steals of the draft.
Yeah, I agree. And when you consider Antoine Randall and the potential relationship there, I mean, you saw the video of when they called Luther Burden and the excitement that, they first they give it to Poles, then it's to Ben Johnson, then it's to Kevin Warren, then it's to Antoine Randall, and you see how he lights up when he talks to him. And Jamison Williams and Luther Burden actually went to the same high school together for a period of time. So I think that there's some symmetry there, and you look at how he did helping mold Jamison Williams, Antoine Randall in Detroit. So I think there's a blueprint there for Luther's success. I think really what it all came down to was, Ben Johnson needed to get weapons. That was, I think, part of what his calling to Ryan Poles was like, hey, get me some weapons in here. And maybe it was a running back. Maybe they were waiting on Travion Henderson. But, when Travion comes off the board, they're like, okay, well, what weapons are left? And Luther Burden is sitting right there for you. So I think that that's kind of where the mindset for the Bears was like, we're going to get a weapon. Yes, it can be a running back, but we're not beholden to that.
And a lot of other comparisons. Nobody was making the Bayless Jones comparison, but I always, when I'm trying to figure out what Ryan Poles is going to do, always try to figure out the type of players that Ryan Poles likes to draft, which is kind of shocking to me because I know that it had been mentioned that Ryan Poles didn't really like Membo that much, which is, for me, I'm like, that's the kind of, like, I'm glad I didn't necessarily, I actually stumbled upon Luther Burden watching Membo tape. But Membo always seemed like that kind of guy, like perhaps Ryan Poles liked, but he didn't. It didn't matter. He was drafted anyways, so we'll never have to worry about it. Phil was so pissed at me. Like, what are you saying that's who they're going to? I'm like, I'm not saying that's. I'm like, that's usually those are the kind of things Ryan Poles looks for. But when again going back to what Ryan Poles likes, what Ben Johnson likes, the one comparison that I've heard, and Bucky Brooks made this comparison because I was thinking more like it reminds me a little bit of Stephon Diggs, but Bucky was talking about how he reminds him of Deebo Samuel. And if you remember, when Deebo was good. When Deebo was one of the stars of the NFL, it was because he was running the football. Do you believe that we could probably see some packages where Luther Burden III is going to be running the ball?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That to me, Jamison Williams, you saw that with him last year. And they had that one end around where he took it for 45 yards and a touchdown. So, I think that you'll see a lot of different packages with him and Colston Loveland for that matter. Colston Loveland's 6'6". So, everybody talks about Tyler Warren getting lined up in the backfield. Let's get these two guys, some different trickeration in the backfield and see how defenses respond to that. So I think that those are both certainly on the table. And Ben Johnson knows how to get the most out of his guys. Yeah. And so he's going to know how to get, yes, they're rookies. So there's going to be, a little bit of a grace period we have to give them with development. But I think that, sooner rather than later, Ben Johnson's going to figure out how to, implement these guys to make them a threat to every defense they're playing.
No, and that's the one thing that I'm really looking forward to is the creative ways to go out there and use these players. So even though they're not, they missed out on Ashton Genty, they miss out on Henderson. Okay. And they just don't automatically default to going running back. Like they're not they're drafting players. They're not drafting just to draft. Ozzie comes up there. They're second of 3 second-round picks. I kind of like it. And again, I think at this point you're drafting for depth. I thought Ozzie was a pretty well-regarded player. I was going back and again familiar with him from DJ's board. I thought that was a pretty nice pick, even though I know that he's technically a right tackle, but it sounds like he's been training all over the line of scrimmage. Could be a valuable little swing piece for us.
Yeah, certainly a swing piece or potentially their right tackle. I mean, when the Poles spoke to the media at the podium, he was asked, directly, like, hey, is it a guarantee that Darnell Wright will stay at right tackle, or could you potentially move him over to the left side? And he said, that's something they're going to have to discuss. It wasn't a hard line, no, Darnell's staying at right. So you bring in Tripoli and maybe he is your right tackle of the future. I think he has that potential. Personally, I would have Tripoli, trying out for the left side as a rookie. But if they see it a different way, it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out. I know that there were some people, I think it was Brandon Thorne, that said that Tripoli was the most ready tackle that was available in the draft, so that's an interesting little note to take in there for Bears fans. And so, hey, yes, it seems like he's a right side guy, but let's see how everything shakes out.
Yeah, one of the things that I really like about him too, and you heard about, I think it was Daniel who was talking about this during the draft. Maybe it was the ESPN guys talking about like how he doesn't make mistakes. Like he's a disciplined player. I think he had 5 penalties during his time in college, or just I think he had like 5 penalties during his time as a thing, and like that's something that needs to happen. Like that's one of the things that I feel really failed us with Matt Eberflus and Shane Waldron and all those guys, is like just a lack of discipline at times. So even if this guy comes in and doesn't commit, like just doesn't jump on the snap, doesn't get a false start, I think we've got a winner here.
Yeah, I agree. And Ben, everything has changed since Ben Johnson has come to Chicago, right? I mean, as soon as they walked in for free agency, look at how many moves immediately come off the board. And so to me, when you look at all the first trade they made, right, was for Jonah Jackson. That was well before free agency even started. The first signing they made in free agency was Drew Dahlman. The first draft pick was Colston Loveland. And so clearly Ben Johnson has got his fingerprints all over what they're doing. And that's why a lot of times when I'm on my shows, I'm like referencing that Ben Johnson drafted this, Ben Johnson drafted that. And people are like, well, wait a minute, these are Ryan Poles' guys. I don't know, man. It seems like there's a new era here where Ben Johnson is definitely having a huge input on what's going on. You look at the free agency, all the first moves were offense. Look at the draft, all the first moves were offense, and then defense came second. So, it's interesting to watch all this play out.
Yeah, and Shamar Turner, who was the 3rd pick there in the 2nd round, I really like this one too. And I now look at me, I love it. But you know what? I think that, and again, you had touched on this previously, where the Bears were pretty much everything is set. Okay, like everything is set. I'm like, we didn't get a safety. I'm like, okay, listen. If Malachi Starks was there in the 2nd round and we're not drafting him, that would have been a problem. I get that. He wasn't. He was gone. And of course, the good teams are taking him. Derek Harmon was a player who I love. And by the way, of all the guys who were not drafted by the Bears, and you're like, what's your favorite pick in this? Derek Harmon, who was another player that I was talking about, along with Luther Bird, that the Bears have missed out on Mason Graham. And I'm like, if somehow he managed, of course not, he manages to find a way. I love Derek Harmon. But when you get Turner, and this was a guy who played very well at Texas A&M, he played with a huge injury. And again, he doesn't need to come in to be a superstar. We got Grady Jarrett. We got Gervin Dexter, Andrew Billings, Grady Jarrett we signed during the offseason. I think this is just another signature piece and just a revolving door on the defensive line. And good teams always seem to have those waves of pass rushes.
Yep. And he played on a team that had waves of pass rushers, right, with Shamar Stewart and Nick Scorton. So, when you look at potential, production when you talk about these guys. There was only so many sacks to go around, right? And you mentioned he played injured, so there's a toughness there. The injury is a concern, not going to lie. Guys that you're drafting guys that have an injury history, but, got a little bit of nastiness to them. They need toughness.
Yeah.
This team needs toughness. And, obviously Luther Burden isn't afraid to get scrappy. You saw the highlights of Colston Loveland calling out Ohio State, and I've seen video of him headbutting a guy. Now, Shamar Turner, he's got this great video where a guy is like doing the Draymond Green LeBron James moment where LeBron's hanging over Draymond in the NBA Finals, and Shamar Turner just cocks back and says, all right, let's go. And he starts fighting his way out of it. Turner ends up being the guy that gets thrown out. Now somehow that becomes a mark against him. But as Lance Briggs said, good. I like a guy that's going to stick up for himself, and so that I think those things, as silly as it sounds, they need a little bit more toughness, a little bit more chippiness on this team. And I think with him, they got that.
Yeah. And I'm going to contradict myself because talking about everything with Ozzie, not being Ozzie being a very disciplined player and then being like, well, if this guy gets an unnecessary roughness call, it's whatever. I think there's obviously a difference between the two of like dumb penalties. Like the Raiders back, you're too young to remember this, but the Raiders back in the day used to be like the most penalized team in the NFL, but it wasn't like they were getting false starts. No, they were like, late hitting people and doing something and like setting a tone. And I think that, and we've seen like, and I don't want it to be in the Tyreek Stevenson of like, you're taunting the crowd type of like meltdowns, but like, hey, if somebody's standing over you, like if somebody takes an extra liberty with Caleb Williams and we get one of their guys, so be it. That's the kind of stuff that I can live with. And I love that kind of edge. And I love that kind of persona that we're getting with some of these players. So for the first 4 picks of the draft, like I'm on board. I'm like, I love everything. I'm in, love it. And then we get to Ruben Hippolyte and like, okay.
Poor Ruben Hippolyte.
No, but here's the thing though. And this is the thing that sucks for me is he posts a video and it's just so cool. And you're like, all right, I like the guy. I'm rooting for him. Like I'm like literally I'm in. I like you, Ruben. I personally like you. I'm just not kind of sure. I don't know.
I was talking with Shane earlier and he said he was like ranked like 478th or something crazy among draft prospects. And it was the lowest rated draft prospect to ever be drafted or something like that. And I was like, well, hey, sounds like a great story to me, like, everybody's writing this dude off because he's got a funny last name, like truly, like that's all this is. Nobody knows who he is and he's got a funny last name. So now we're going to pick on him. And obviously everybody talks about his speed. They needed to plan ahead for the future at linebacker. That was something a lot of people had brought up. They draft him. And yes, I'm spin zoning here, Adam. Let me spin zone. And so like, to me, did you see the tweet somebody put out of them reminding people of when Kyler Gordon was drafted and showing all the comments underneath it?
Of course.
So I think that is a good reminder because everybody was writing off that pick. That it's a good reminder just because it might not have been in the guy on your board doesn't mean he can't equate to end up being a good contributor for a team.
Well, I mean, like, listen, it's nothing like that because I remember in the Kyler Gordon pick, I think they were pissed that they didn't take Christian Watson.
No, George Pickens, right?
George Pickens, either one of them. It's one of those two. It doesn't matter. I think we're better off without either one of those guys. We did fine. And it's easy. And again, like you don't go out there like not you, but like maybe most fans are not sitting here breaking down 500 draft prospects and going through it. I think that my initial reticence was like, who is this person? I don't really know him. Now we're getting into the like, I've heard of the guys that we've drafted so far. Like, okay, I'm good. Then you're like, I don't know this guy. He's fast. And you're like, okay, what is Lance? Lance Zierlein has him as a 5th rounder. And then, it's just one of those things like, all right, like, is this, I don't want, I've now been charmed by him. So I'm rooting for him. And I think it's one of those things too, like, hey, it will be a great story in the draft. If he plays well and, the announcer's turning to Greg Olson and being like, well, Greg, back in 2024, 2025, people didn't think that he was much of a prospect coming out of the NFL draft.
Right.
Sometimes though, it's like, why are you he's a highly regarded high school player. Why were you at Maryland? That's the one thing that I'm always curious about. Like, what happened in your life? And no disrespect to like Sean Merriman or Joe Smith or anybody that went to Maryland, but it's like, you went to Maryland. Like, how good? Like, you couldn't even, not even NC State. I don't know. The hierarchy enough.
And I think the other big issue with the pick was that they traded back from 109. They go back from 109 to 132.
Yeah.
And Jack Sawyer was still on the board.
Yeah.
Right. And you had some different running backs still on the board. Clearly they were looking at running backs. And so almost just like, with the first pick and Kelvin Banks coming off the board. I mean, personally, I was devastated we didn't get Cam Scatterbo. And now we're getting Ruben Hippolyte. That's your trade-off from Cam Scatterbo.
We got a guy with a cool name. So it's all right.
Yeah. So we'll take it. We'll
Scatterbo. I'm now actively rooting against him. Just because I don't want the Bears to be like, oh, we could have had him. I don't want it to be a George Kittle type thing. Where it's like, oh, we could have this player.
Well, we couldn't have. It'd have been one thing if we had passed on him, but he was taken like 3 picks before the Bears pick at 109. So,
we could have taken him at 38.
Yeah, they could have taken him in. Yeah, exactly. They could have taken him in the 3rd round.
You know what I'm saying?
Or they could have traded up. So I see your point there.
We could have taken him instead of Turner or whomever. Like, it's just one of those things. But like Hippolyte, you're like, okay. And then Zoff Frazier, and you're like, okay. Like, he's like 30, but it's like, okay, maybe. You're like, okay, these are 5th. Okay, I'm not going to get too upset. Luke Newman. I'm like, oh, I'm back. I know a player. Again, Luke Newman. Like, I think Luke Newman, I know, and I'm such a homer. I think he's kind of a dog. I kind of like him. I was like, oh, that's not bad. Like Michigan State, like hard-nosed player. Like, probably not going to go out there and go to the Pro Bowl or the Hall of Fame. But you're like, that's a guy that can start some games for us.
I mean, I'm all for, more trenches, more better, right? So
yeah,
Luke Newman, obviously, more Big Ten guys you can bring in, the better too, even if they're from Maryland too. So I have no issue with it. It is kind of getting in the weeds a little bit when you talk about, what their capabilities are. He's a 6th round pick. So, but he's got a lot of size to him. And so I asked for trenches and I got it. I got 2 offensive linemen, got a defensive lineman. So I can't fight this draft too much. I did get what I was asking for. It just came in a different order. And we even got some skill guys too, which I always love.
Yeah, which is huge. And by the way, if you saw my reaction, I just took a peek at the Angels score. It was 3-3 when I walked up here. Now they're down 9-3. I hate baseball. My Cubs are winning. Yeah, thankfully, my Cubs are still playing well.
Cubs are doing well, but they start here in 5 minutes.
The Cubs are the only team that have not played a side that's below 500. They played the Dodgers 30 times.
Yesterday was their first game of the season playing someone under 500.
Oh, sorry, I lied.
It's fine. It was a great stat yesterday that was put out by that Jay Kuda, who does great charts. And 0 games played against teams under 500 before yesterday. And then Pittsburgh, then they end up beating Pittsburgh like 9-0. First divisional game for the Cubs yesterday too. They've been playing Dodgers for the entire month of April.
Yeah, playing the Dodgers and the Padres and the Diamondbacks for the entirety of the month. But I guess it's a home swing because it's all the home teams for people here out on the West Coast who still support the Cubs, who didn't coerce their parents into rooting for the Angels. But you got to understand. No, actually, the Cubs were good when I was a kid too. My dad should have put his foot down. But it's very difficult in that if you were living here, it's so hard for me now. Obviously, a lot of these things are on TV, and it's easy. The Cubs were on WGN, although we didn't have cable, so that was also a knock against us back in the day. Baseball just feels like you got to root for the team that you live near. It just, I don't know. I can't imagine, like, if for whatever reason, if I move back to Chicago, I will tell you right now, if they were like, hey, you got to move to Chicago. Okay. Here's the area I'm looking at, Roscoe Village, and that's it. It's the only place I'm looking. And then my kid, I'm not going to make my kids go to school on Fridays, or at least I'm going to take them out half day. And they would be full on Cubs fan. They'll be like, I hope you enjoyed your time rooting for the Angels. You're now Cubs fans. Or if we move to Miami, like you're Marlins fans, I'm sorry. This is why I won't move to Miami. Like, this is one of those things. Like, I will.
One thing you do it for the Cubs. Don't do it for the Marlins. That's not.
If we move to Cincinnati, because my friend is going through this right now. He's like, my son loves the Reds. I'm like, he should. It's his hometown team. He can go to the games. There's 81 of them, and you can go to a bunch of them. That one notwithstanding, I'm delaying it because now I want to talk about my favorite player of all time. When I talk about my favorite running backs in Bears history, of course, it's going to be Walter Payton. Of course, it's going to be my birthday buddy, Matt Forte. And then Kyle Monangai is now my third favorite running back of all. I love it. And again, one of these things, like I've heard of him. I'm like, I don't know anything about him. So I'm like, I'm not going to sit here in front. And even when I came on, I think it was Sunday. Sunday. No, it was Sunday. I was doing Instagram Live. I was doing TikTok stuff. And I'm like, I'm going to go watch his games. I'll be back. I'll see you guys in 12 hours. And then I come back and I'm like, I'm his biggest fan. Yep. I truly believe Kyle Monangai is going to have a huge role on this team. I don't think we're going to sign Nick Chubb or any of these other guys. And I don't think they want to, because I think they're going to be so thrilled with Monangai. No block, no rock. That's that guy's middle name. I love that pick. I think teams have made a mistake. I think and this happens over the last number of years. Teams try to because the undrafted free agent thing, you usually know, like, there's a reason why all those get announced quickly, is because those get lined up real quick. Right. And they're like, hey, you know what? We're going to sign you. We're going to sign you. You're not going to get drafted, so we're going to sign you. Parameters, all this stuff. And I think the Bears are like, F all that. We're just going to draft you. And amazing move. And I'm already in. And I will help. I will help. I think I'm ready for it.
Another Big Ten guy too, by the way. Right?
Yes.
So Michigan, Maryland, Michigan State, Rutgers. So we're staying close to home with the Big Ten.
What conference is Missouri? Other SEC.
SEC, which, hey, that's a tough conference. You're going up against some tough DBs there, Luther Burden. So Kyle Monangai, having to fight through the trenches of the Big Ten, certainly some tough games there. He's a bowling ball. There's no question. His highlight reel is certainly a lot of fun. Everybody's highlight reel is fun, but I think he is the opposite of everything that Ruben Hippolyte, was to fans, because Ruben was a guy that should have gone 7th round or undrafted, goes in the 4th round, and Kyle Monangai goes in the 7th round and maybe should have been higher. I know there's people that had him as high as a 3rd or 4th round grade. And because
it was my number 2 RB on the board.
Yeah, I'm sure.
In retrospect.
Right. I mean, he's Ashton Genty light, right?
I think I wrote, if you don't get Ashton Genty, make sure you get Kyle Monangai.
Yeah. Who also has a fun name. So we're drafting all sorts of people with fun names. And so, I like the pick. And I also think that because of the way the running back class fell, I thought that there'd be like an early run on running backs because there were so many talented ones. And it ended up being the opposite because they kept kind of falling down the list, that every team kind of was like, oh, well, we can be patient with that position. And that ended up bumping some guys down to the 6th and 7th round that maybe would have gone earlier in earlier years. So, hey, the beneficiary is the Bears. They get a pretty solid option in the 7th round. I mean, Travis Bell, remember when the Bears drafted Travis Bell, the defensive tackle from, I believe, Kennesaw State, and we all were excited for Travis Bell. This is a little bit different of a prospect when you're getting a running back out of the Big Ten. I think somebody brought up Isaiah Pacheco, who I believe went to the same college, right?
I think he's also Rutgers.
Similar kind of violent style of running and quick twitch, and got a little bit of a bowling ball routine. So I love the pick, and I agree with you. I think he's going to have an instant potential impact, and certainly could push a guy like Roschon Johnson, on the depth chart when we get to training camp.
100%. And you know what? And going back to Ruben Hippolyte, and same thing with Kyle Monangai, it said, why are you at Rutgers? If you were so good, why are you at Rutgers? Well, you go, it just takes a couple of minutes to go do a little bit of a dive. And you find out his older brother played at Villanova. So these are Jersey kids.
Right.
So number one, they're loyal because they're staying home. And I think Hippolyte might have been a Maryland guy too. So I should give him credit for staying home and not chasing the big money to go to like Texas Christian or something, whatever. But they're loyal guys. Kyle's brother had a cup of coffee with a couple of teams in the NFL, didn't really stick, but he was this great prep running back out there in Jersey, stayed at Rutgers, and you're like, okay, I'll spin this my own way now. Like, loyalty means everything. This Jersey kid wants to stay loyal. Probably grew up a Giants fan, so that's fine. I respect that.
Nobody's perfect.
That's great. No. Like, listen, I have no beef with that. If he grew up in Jersey and as a Giants or an Eagles guy, whatever. Like, but I think it's the part of Jersey where he would be a Giants guy because I had Rutgers. So I love all of that. But what you were just saying with the way that the draft worked out this way, and we had talked about this because with the success of Saquon Barkley, it made drafting Ashton Genty worthwhile. Like, hey, you know what? Like, this is how important it is. And Bijan Robinson has proven to be a pretty good player too, a guy who was drafted in the top 10. So he's like, okay, there's now a bigger a comfort zone of drafting guys in the top, running backs back in the top 10, top 20 again, which is great. But at the same time, and this again, it'll mirror what you do in fantasy football in that, well, once we get past the truly elite guy, once we get past Ashton Genty, who is clearly on another tier away from Travion Henderson and Hampton and all those other guys in the running back class, and even when you got past those two guys, then the tier just becomes blurred. It's almost like the draft was like Ashton Genty was in a tier by himself, Hampton, Henderson, and there's somebody I'm missing. But like tier
Judkins.
Yeah, you know what? Like tier 2 was very small. And I think that tier 3 was flooded with guys. And much like you will do in your fantasy football draft, these NFL teams are like, whatever. Like, even if we take a guy who's undrafted, there's not much of a difference than what we're getting if we miss out on one of the truly elite players. And so that was an easy call for them to make. And the Bears waited, and I think that they ended up with a pretty good one. And I know there's a lot of guys. Denver's guy, a lot of RJ Harvey. I know a lot of people I'm excited about him too. I thought that was another player. And forgive me, Broncos fans, when I was on the Instagram earlier this week, like I kept forgetting somebody. Like, who is somebody? That's another good player too, that I think like, okay, so there are some dudes out there who are going to go out there and do some damage, but I really like it. But overall, like when you look at the overall pieces and you don't have to pretend that every pick was a home run.
Sure we do.
What is your grade of the draft?
I gave it a B. I'm just trying to be fair. I mean, you got a couple years to prove yourself out. And so I think it's it is a silly exercise to immediately put a grade. It's like ranking president, in their first year. You got to give them 4 years to prove it, but I'll keep politics out of the show. I apologize for that one. But that's the old adage, like don't judge, it's 4 years. And I think maybe for NFL draft picks, I think you got to wait 3 years to kind of see how a draft board actually went. And so, for me, I'm going to go a B. Would I have potentially considered Mykel Williams in the first round? Sure. You know, the trade back at 109 was tough, and I don't know if they got the best out of it, and so there's some different things there. Ariante Ursary was there at 39 and 41. So you have some different options. I'm not saying that those picks would have been the perfect picks. I think Bears fans certainly would have been celebrating had they taken Mykel Williams and Ariante Ursary with those first 2 or 3 picks, and you come away with Luther Burden, let's say, with the other one. But you did trade back. You got an extra second round pick. You end up with your running back in the 7th round. Maybe you could have got one higher. Missing out on Cam Scatterboo was tough, like we went over. So I think overall I would probably give it a B, but it has more than I'll give it more than an opportunity to move up to where it needs to be.
Yeah, I think a lot of it too, because there's people just like Scatterboo. I mean, honestly, is he really that? I mean, it's not like he was a first rounder. It's not like, I think a lot of people fall in love with certain players. They love them, which is fine.
Yes,
which is fine.
I am in love.
I have no problem with that. And I'm funny because I'm watching my kids play baseball right now. So they got soccer training tonight. They're playing baseball. They're all over it. They're actually active now. I'd love to see it.
It's good stuff.
Let me ask you a question though, because now everybody's freaking out about what number Luther Burden is going to wear. And it's funny because people do the jersey swaps.
Right.
And it's like, hey, it's number 3. And it's McAfee, or Bronco Nagurski's 3. And it's and number 5 for Monangai. And you're like, well, that's George McAfee. It's like, what do you think about, I would never want to say, nobody should ever wear 34 ever again.
Right.
That one is beyond sacred. I would even say 40, 51. I feel like there's retired numbers and then there's retired numbers. A couple of years ago when JJ Watt, and it's JJ Watt, so it's a little bit different. He goes and plays in Arizona. Number 99 is retired for Marshall Goldberg, who, unless you're Elliot Harrison and me, you don't know who Marshall Goldberg is. So you pull the name off the Raptors, people are like, oh, this Marshall Goldberg guy is pretty goddamn good. This is pretty amazing. And you learn about him. For the Bears, do you think and I don't know if Luther Burden's the guy, because again, they're not JJ Watt. I kind of like the idea of sometimes pulling these numbers out of the Raptors so people can have a history lesson of who Bronco Nagurski was, who George McAfee was, because a lot of people have no idea. Where do you stand on that?
No, I'm with you. I think that, well, I should say I'm not with you because I'm not really sure where your stance is, but I think that this is where it helps to just have a ring of honor, and if you want to only retire a few numbers that make sense, like George Halas and Walter Payton, and then leave it at that, and then everyone else is in the ring of honor, now you can keep your numbers open. And if somebody is so rare, because Urlacher's number isn't retired, Devin Hester's number will never be retired. That's, if we're going to actually retire numbers like those, it's crazy to think that those guys would not be, so I think that's something to think about, is maybe doing something like that. But, it's a tricky spot because you've already retired their numbers. So, how do you unretire a number without, making it disrespectful? That's where I think they run into a little bit of trouble.
Well, I think but the Goldberg family had to sign off on it. And again, when it's JJ Watt, it's a pretty easy, not like Jerry Rice coercing Steve Largent, who had retired 4 years previously. They were contemporaries, for crying out loud. One of the greatest examples of this was Rod Smith was playing for the Broncos when Jerry Rice tried to catch on with them. And he's like, can I wear your number 80? And he's like, nope. You can go wear number 19, sir. Just a great moment in sport. So I feel and again, this is not about nothing. I just think if I'm the family of Bronco Nagurski and you're like, you know what? Nobody ever talks about our grandfather. It's got to be great-great-grandfather by now. It would be cool to get his name out there for a little bit more. But I understand if they're like, this is sacred, nobody should ever wear this. Bronco Nagurski is one of the legends of the NFL. George McAfee, I was like, hey, if T. Higgins is coming here, 5's coming off the rafters, dude.
Right.
And like when you go to Cal State Fullerton, if you go to a Cal State Fullerton baseball game, there are 3 retired numbers: Augie Garrido, maybe 4, Tim Wallach, Mark Kotze, Phil Nevin. But when you walk up, they'll show you like some of the famous people who have worn a number. Like Matt Chapman wore number 6 at Cal State Fullerton. The number's not retired, but you're like, oh, Matt Chapman wore 6 when he played here. Cool. But somebody is wearing number 6 now. Not for nothing. That was just I just think about S like that because I love the history of the Bears and I love the history of the NFL. But Sammy, how about a couple of questions from the crowd?
I was gonna ask you then, who are we retiring? Like, are you retiring Willie Gallimore, running back? I think he's on the list. Willie Gallimore, come on now.
I'm saying 34, 51.
Brian
40.
Piccolo. Does Brian Piccolo stay at 41? It's great. That's a tough one. Clyde Turner, number 66. You're out.
Bulldog Turner.
I don't mean to be disrespectful.
Well, we're a different franchise than some other franchises, though, too.
Bill Hewitt.
I mean, whenever you go to like
you're out.
Whenever you go to like a Chargers game, maybe this isn't the best example, but it's like, hey, and you look at their Ring of Honor. They don't have many numbers retired. I think it's Allworth. 19's retired for sure, because I was at the game where they retired his number. I'm assuming 21's retired by man, is it? I don't know. But like you look at some of these teams, and you're like, this is your Ring of Honor. Like, oh boy, the Bears are a little bit different because they have legends of football. Some of these other teams, like, yeah, you've been around here for a while. Like,
this is their opportunity, though. When they build a new stadium,
yeah,
you don't just can have a Ring of Honor. You can have like the Walk of Fame, however you want to say it. Like when you go to Wrigley Field,
that's it. And that's what Cal State Fullerton's like. Yeah, right. You cannot miss it. If you go to a game, you have to walk by.
The walkway heading right to the stadium should have statues every 5 feet, like on each side. Starts with Walter Payton and George Halas, and as you work down, there's each of the Hall of Famers with their statues. Then you go in, there's a Ring of Honor that, signifies their numbers within the stadium too. And you just keep adding to those statues. Get Urlacher and Hester there on the backside, and I think that's a good kind of meeting in the middle.
Yeah. I think that's probably a little bit more interesting than people being like, why does nobody wear number 66 on this team? And not even probably noticing most of the time. Sammy, though, what about a question or two while we have some time? Adam, would you have drafted Williams ahead of Loveland at 10? Ooh, I love Love. I really do like this Loveland pick. What about you? Would you have drafted Williams ahead?
Yeah, in the moment, I probably would have. Honestly, in the moment after we lost Kelvin Banks, I was so upset. I was like, just draft Josh Connerly and be done with this. Like, because it just felt like they were going for the left tackle there. They miss out on 3, and so there's a frustration from me there. And now I'm looking at Josh Connerly and Ariante Ursary. Obviously, Ursary goes way later. But I was just thinking to myself, just draft Josh Connerly and be done with it. And then I guess if you were to, really put me to a lie detector test, my second option would have been Michael Williams. And then my third option would have been Derek Harmon, or Walter Nolan.
Right.
Because I'm looking at trenches. The Super Bowls are won in the trenches. And so I just don't know. I just wouldn't have. That was full transparency on the show when I said, yes, Colston Loveland is the best tight end in my opinion, but I just don't know if I would have drafted tight end at 10. Now he's here. Have no issue against him at all. I think he's very talented, and I look forward to what Ben Johnson can do with him. But I would have, he was like 6th, 7th on my list of what I was looking at in that spot, even, maybe 5th once the board fell the way it did. So there's nothing against Loveland, but that's where I was at.
Yeah, when I think about this, because we were doing a show, I was on the Marquee Sports Show, and Carmen Vitale's mock draft had Tyler Warren on it. And I do know that I said, like, I'd rather have Colson Loveland. I said, if I'm being perfectly truthful, like I would take Colson Loveland. I think he's a better player for us. And I think he's going to end up being a better all-around player. Would I have taken him? Probably. Like I'm an offensive-minded fantasy football dork. I think I would have taken Loveland ahead of that. I think it's fine. I think Michael Williams will be okay, but I think we're fine. What about another question? I really wanted Mason Graham though. I wonder who will play left tackle this year. No, I don't think Wonder's going to play. We don't have him. Stevie Wonder's no longer. No. The speculation. I mean, I know Braxton Jones is coming off an injury, but I still don't rule him. I don't know. Maybe we'll see what happens as we get closer to training camp and all that kind of stuff. But I'm like,
it's gonna be tough for Braxton. Poles has already said that or either Poles or Ben at the owners meeting. I think it was Poles said that, or Ben said it at the owners meeting, that he'll be limited when training camp starts.
Yeah,
that's in July. It's in August.
Yes.
And they're starting mini camp next week. They got OTAs coming up. So he's going to be behind. And when you're talking about an offense being installed and you're just doing mental reps versus physical reps with a coach that's certainly trying to put his, just emphasize what he's trying to do as a coach, I think he's going to be in kind of starting from behind, with this competition going on there at left tackle. And if they do ultimately decide early on that they're going to move Darnell to left and let the rookie play on the right side, Trapillo, I think Braxton's in some hot water right now.
Yeah. I think he's too, but I mean, he's due for a contract soon. So it's like, yeah, I do believe that like they love him, but at the same time, he hasn't produced the kind of way I think even as a 5th round pick, what they expected, and really giving him an opportunity to start as quickly as they did. So yeah, he probably is under a little bit of pressure right now. How about one more question there, Sammy? If we got it, is Chicago bringing in Chubb? Thank you, Burley Sullivan, for bringing up this question. We did talk about this briefly. I'm saying no. And is it because of Kyle Monangai? I'm like, yeah, that's part of the reason. Like, why are we going? We don't need to go back for Nick Chubb. And I went out there and I posted this on my Instagram a couple of days ago in one of the stories. I'm like, hey, is he coming to Chicago? And overwhelmingly, like usually when you put like a big name coming to your team, there's a lot of casual people who are like Nick Chubb, like, of course. Most people, the overwhelming majority are like, no, don't come to Chicago. God bless Nick Chubb. I hope it works out for him, but I can't see that working out for us in Chicago.
Well, certainly his injury history is concerning, but I see Guy Finley in the chat saying don't need another running back. Well, I don't have a problem bringing in competition. I'm excited for Kyle Monangai. And I think I think Bears Twitter is being very hard on DeAndre Swift. He's not a perfect back.
I like him. I'm in. No. I'm not. I like him.
Right. Well, and so I think I've even been hard on DeAndre Swift. I was trying to jettison him for Ashton Genty for the last couple weeks. So, at the same time though, that doesn't mean he's a terrible player. And some fans, I think, kind of got so caught up in this running back class that meant that they had to kind of pile on Swift to make their point, and so I think people are overstating that if the ineptitude of DeAndre Swift, I don't think it's as bad as some people make it out to be. And Roschon Johnson can be your goal line back. He's going to have to really fight to have a bigger role than that. I like Kyle Monangai, but he's a rookie. Yeah. If Nick Chubb wants to come here for 1 year, couple $1 million and compete, everybody's competing now. I said that on CHGO. We clipped it like, hey, Cole Kmet. I love Cole Kmet. He's my guy. Yeah. But guess what? And they can play together on the field. They have different roles at tight end, but they're all competing for the football. You bring in Luther Burden. He can play with these wide receivers. He can play with these tight ends on the same field, but they're competing for that football. Who's going to be the one that fights to get open? who's going to be the one that fights to make that block when the ball's not in your hand? They're competing at left tackle. They're competing. You bring in a linebacker to compete with Noah Sewell. What has Noah Sewell been doing the last couple of years? They drafted him. What has he done? And so bring in Ruben Hippolyte to put some heat on him. You bring in Zay Frazier. I'm not saying he's taking Tyreek Stevenson's job, but you know what? You never know, and then you also have Terrell Smith, who's another corner that he can put a little bit of heat on. It's a guy that had 6 interceptions in college last year. So Kyle Monungai, another guy that's going to put some heat on guys. I have no problem with them bringing a guy like Nick Chubb in, who's had great success here in the NFL, and let these guys compete and let the whole thing figure itself out.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And you want that competition. You want to breed competition. It reminds me a little bit too of like when Pete Carroll came to USC and really just turned the program around with the spirit of competition, brought the same thing to Seattle. I remember him and John Schneider made like 200 moves, like just crazy amount of moves, just trying to get as much competition as possible. And it seems like this is what the Bears are trying to do. And so, yeah, I guess in some respects, if you want to bring in Nick Chubb, but to me, I don't know. I don't know if he's the answer. I'm happy trying out some other guys, but at the same time, I don't know. Nick Chubb's fine. I like him. I'm rooting for him. I hope he does well.
If it's 1 year, $3 million, who really cares?
That still seems like a lot of money. We're going to have to cut somebody. Once we sign our draft picks, we're at the cap. We're gone. The days of like, we've got all this cap space are gone.
I know.
We're right at the limit.
It's not my money.
Can't put any more money on this credit card, Greg. But listen, we got to go. I want to thank everybody for being here. Fun show. Please follow the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank on YouTube, on X, not while you're on X. I mean, on the platform, like on Twitter, not even if you're doing drugs, it's fine. I don't care. You ever have that? You ever have that happen where you're like walking up to some guy?
No, I've never been on X.
When they go, they're like, hey, they're saying, how are you doing? Right as you say hi. I always be like, I got to stop them. Be like, excuse me, sir. Like, I'm not high. You asked me how I'm doing, and I said hi, but I had already committed to saying the word hi as a greeting.
Right.
Similarly here, subscribe on all that
you
stuff.
Don't say you're super high.
Yeah.
And I don't call it X. It's still Twitter.
I just saw the logo.
Yeah, I get it, but
that was the first time I've ever done it, I think.
Right. Calling X Twitter is like calling the Sears Tower the Willis Tower, or calling, Comiskey Park, what guaranteed
rate field?
Yeah, guaranteed rate or US Cellular. Nothing against those, but it's always going to be Comiskey.
Yeah,
I don't care
it's
what
the Sears Tower, people.
Yeah.
Oh, and Discover might get merged with somebody else. Like, is nothing sacred anymore? All these great Chicago institutions. Don't let Discover. Where's Congress? Stop this. Discover. By the way, and I'm not going to get into it. I have a Sears rant, but I'm going to save it for another time. I'm going to let you go. We'll be back together, I believe, on Friday.
Yep.
Unless I find a way to blow you guys off. I don't know. Cal State Fullerton's calling me.
I don't know. We take turns. Either I'm at Wrigley or you got something going on, but that's okay. It's the summertime. We got to figure things out and work through it. But no, I'll be on Friday, and I'm excited to see you there.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Follow on all the social media channels. Till next time, bear down, and Sammy, play us out.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.